Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome back to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird, this time with the Sisters of Battle. Now for the good model in this one, which is just a model I find very cool, we're going with this Chaos Sister of Battle, if you will. Now this model is rather great, honestly, I love this model. And I started by priming gray and then dry brushing white, as we're going to be using a lot of contrasts here, as she's going to be joining one of my forces of Chaos Space Marines, and that's not without good reason. This model is quite a bit larger than your average Sisters model. As you can see here, she's much closer to a Space Marine in size. So she will be a Special Gunner in a Space Marine, or Chaos Space Marine squad, and as you can see, I'm using the same color scheme I did there. And to get that effect, first up, we are going to start with the blue. Now I use Azerman Blue, the contrast paint, over this, of course, dry brushed gray, which will just help bring out the detail quite a bit. This is a really good contrast paint. I really recommend it if you want a blue one. I'm just using a medium layer brush from GW that I got as a freebie, and it worked quite well. You're going to want to do this on the calves as well as the forearms for the arms, which I am painting detached from the model just because I wanted to make sure I could get all of the details down on this one. Moving on from there, we need to do the next color, which is going to be Bad Moon's Yellow, one of my favorite contrasts because it makes yellow a breeze. You're just going to put this on pretty much everything except the forearms and the lower legs. So it would be the thighs, the shoulder pads, the waist armor. All of that is going to be painted up in this yellow color, as well as the shoulder pads, the helmet. This makes up, again, the bulk of the body. This is based, of course, on a Chaos Space Marine force that I have. That's an Imperial Fist successor, or they were. And as I showed earlier, this model is pretty large, so she will fit right in as just, a plasma gunner in that force. Now, I did want to talk about these minis while I do this yellow painting, because, of course, this is a bulk of the model. I really like these. Now, Chaos Sisters of Battle have been done in artwork and in minis forever, but I think this is probably my favorite that I've seen. I think it really gets the balance down quite well between level of detail and not being too noisy, something that a lot of 3D printed models I find definitely falter in a certain aspect, where they just either go way too sparse on the detail or the detail is way too thin, so everything just kind of looks a little plain. So it's good to see one this well done. Now, this model came in a kit with a bunch of Havocs. You might have seen my short on that. And I got it for a good price, of course. But I just think this is really the best look for Chaos Sisters I've ever seen. And if I were to collect more of these, I would, again, just use them as Chaos Space Marines, or I'd have to get them printed at a smaller scale, but I kind of like this scale more. I think for Chaos Sisters of Battle, if they're spending a lot of time in the warp, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that they could be, swelled in size. That happens to Chaos Space Marines pretty frequently. So I think this model is all around absolutely amazing. It's my favorite model from this batch, bar none, really. But with that, we can move on to the next step of painting, and that is, of course, going to be the cloth, actually. Now, I use Screamer Pink for this because I think it looks quite good. You could also use darker purple, as I tend to kind of wet blend the two in most cases, though it had been a while since I wet blended, so I just went with Screamer Pink for the cloth, and I think it looks quite nice. This is just one of my favorite colors to use. I think it looks great on cloth, especially. So any chance I get a chance to use it, I do, and of course my Chaos Space Marines that use this color scheme already do use this, so it fit in quite well. This is just going to be for the waist cape, or the kama, if you prefer, and then also she has sleeves on her arms that go down to about her elbows, so we wanted to hit those, of course, as well. This is just going to take two thin coats, because Screamer Pink, weirdly, I find covers a little bit better over dark colors than light colors, but it's not the end of the world to get it nice and smooth. From there, we have most of the base colors down. Now all we have to do is all of the metallics, and I use a brass, a Sycorax Bronze, or Balthasar Gold. I tend to prefer Balthasar Gold, actually. I use Sycorax Bronze for highlights, though you could use that if you wanted to. Balthasar Gold is just a really dark, dirty sort of gold color that I think fits quite well with the aesthetic we're going for. And the aesthetic we're going for is very sickly and gross. You'll see why in a minute. Even though everything's very pristine right now, we are definitely going to dull that down with a wash, because it's actually, this color scheme was inspired by an accident a friend of mine made when he shaded yellow with the wrong color. And then I made this whole Chaos Space Marine force. You'll see once we get to the sort of extra detail step that these guys tend to be quite bloody, especially on their limbs, because I went for their background is they're kind of like space marines with rabies, effectively. Like they're just mad, ravening madmen, except for a very small few that make up the leadership. So we're going to wash this down and make it look pretty grimy. Honestly, I could take it further, but I really do like the effect it gets. Now, the trim on this model is very delicate, but it is very defined, so it's not particularly hard to do. You can see me using that layer brush again. It's a very good workhorse, I find. This is going to go on all the trim, the fancy metal bits on her helmet, and things like that. Now, in a bit of bad practice, I admit, I did move from a metallic to a non-metallic. I brought out a gray, and I painted onto her cables. That would be the things on her gorget, I believe it's called, as well as a couple on her power pack, as well as putting into any other places that kind of needed it. You can see that I did make a small mistake here where I got a little bit on her power pack, but that was quick enough to wipe away. We're going to wash this later to make it a dark gray, but this is just to make it look a little bit more rubbery. Next up, I did go back to a metallic. I would recommend inverting these steps, do the metallic first, then the gray. Just using lead belcher, I painted the little striping, I suppose, or cabling, whatever you want to call it, over the top of her power pack, and also picked out the bottom panels of her power pack, things like that, as this is just a useful general purpose color that looks a bit more practical than the Balthasar gold does. So anything metallic that isn't already covered in Balthasar gold, we can very quickly just replace with this. You can see me adjusting my camera here. Next up, we're going on to the most important step of painting all this. It is painting on Drakenhof Nightshade, a blue wash over all of this yellow. Now, that friend of mine was painting Lamenter's Terminators, and then he shaded them with this, and they looked quite like sickly green. Obviously, blue plus yellow makes green. So painting this all over the yellow brings it down to a much more dingy color. While still being yellow, it has those twinges of sickness. It's like, it's an off greenish yellow. And I absolutely love the effect. I pretty much put this over everything. I wasn't particularly neat with it. I mainly hit all of the Balthasar gold. I didn't put it over the blue, but if you get it on it, it's really not a big deal. And you want to be pretty generous with this, not to make huge pools or anything, but just enough to get it to where everything has that sickly darkness about it. As these guys, they are infected, effectively. Even if they're not specifically a Nurgle worshipping warband, they are still afflicted with a plague. So again, get this all over the yellow, and from there, just let it dry, as you do want this to be a rather heavy shade. And next up, we pretty much just have small detail work. I made her target finder eye purple, and then her other eye and the gem in her forehead orange, as that's the traditional color scheme for my Chaos Space Marines. If they have some sort of eyepiece, I do it purple. And then regular lenses are just orange, as well as other gems. I think it just adds a nice bit of intense fieriness to the model. But from there, you're pretty much done. I did mess up the base a lot, so kind of just do whatever you want with the base. Do not follow my lead, because I really just messed it up the whole way around. From there, you are pretty much finished, is what I would say if we didn't have one more important step to do, and that is to gore this model up. These people are, again, ravening madmen for the most part, who have an unsatiable lust to just rip people apart. Even those who use guns have a bad habit of throwing their weapons down. So I got a beat-up old brush, covered it in blood for the blood god, and just went to town on her boots, calves, her forearms, and I got a little bit on the, around her gun and that whole area. And then I also painted on some bloody footprints behind her, as well as coating her waist cape in more blood. I wanted this to be quite gory and fit in with the rest of the force, and I think I did a very, very good job. I love how this model came out, really. Here you can see me just layering up. You want to do a few layers, just because the darkness will hide the blood a little bit, so you want to get in a few layers of this down, and it doesn't have to be super even, but you just want there to be a good amount of gore all over the model. Next up, we have the bad model, which is, of course, one that just tends to be a bit more exaggerated. Here we have this bastet, Seraphim, as it's called, very Egyptian themed, and I'm going to be painting this model up in my Eldar colors, as I didn't really have any other ideas, and it had been a while since I had done that paint scheme, so I wanted to freshen up before I get to painting a lot of my Eldar. As you can see, I also primed gray here, which is standard for my Eldar. And then for the first color, we're actually going to start with a very, very dark red from the Army Painter. That red is, of course, Chaotic Red, which is a red so dark it almost reads as brown when it's fully dried. Now this will take a coat or two, but it's not the most important to get the even coverage. This is effectively just something to punch the boldness of another color we're going to apply later to. This is going to go on all of the armor plating. You don't have to be particularly neat. I did try and avoid the cloth that wraps around the entire model, as we're going to be painting that blue later, so having it be red would be not a huge deal, but again, it's just helpful to be a little bit neat. We're also going to paint up most of her jump pack with this color, and as I said, it will take a coat or two to get this down. Now, with most of the red down, there was another color that I wanted to work on. Also, you can notice I'm changing my lighting. Again, I'm still trying to get the perfect levels down. I'm going to paint the casings of her bolt pistols white. As you saw earlier, the weapons for my Eldar are, in fact, a white with a gray tint. So this was an important step to get in early, just because it's easier to do it now than later. But again, this is pretty simple. It's such a small area that there's really no issue in getting this down. Next up is the contrast I was speaking of earlier, and that is Flesh Terror's Red. Now this is one of the most powerful contrasts I've ever used, to the point where it doesn't even really have the contrast effects of like highlighting the areas and darkening the recesses. It just makes everything a really deep red. Now over gray, this color looks rather pallid, or sort of limp. So I do like to put down this base coat of Chaotic Red before applying this to bring that red level up just an extra notch. And again, you're just going to put this over all of the armor, very nice and easy. This color scheme is pretty easy. I actually did a video painting it a long time ago. If we have any OGs that watched that video, sound off in the comments. And if you haven't seen it and you want to see a pretty admittedly bad video, go watch it. It was very early on in my career on YouTube. Anyways, that's enough reminiscing on the past. I am going to talk about this model, though. Now, this model is definitely a bit more on the sensual side, I suppose. I wouldn't say any more so than regular, or at least not a grand amount more than regular sisters. But obviously, some of the proportions here are a bit more exaggerated. The hips, for example, are definitely a good bit wider. And also, she's not as heroically scaled as regular sisters are, so her hands and weapons are a bit smaller than your average sisters model. But I do really like the posing, and I really like the helmet. It's just a very interesting design. It kind of reaches that level of, like, you're not even sure how you'd see out of it, but it still looks really cool. And the ears on top are kind of cool. Now, as I'm painting this up in my Eldar scheme, I'll probably just use these ladies as swooping hawks, I suppose. That's why I gave them the akimbo ranged weapons. That kind of fits the vibe. And I do really like the design of the jump packs, especially with the orbs on the end. I do like these models, though as you notice, I glued her to a piece of cork instead of using the flying stands, because the flying stands were awful. Again, I did a short on these ladies a little while ago, so you might have seen that. But regardless, with the red almost done, we are ready to move on. Once all that has dried, you'll have a very nice red, and we're going to come in and simply dry brush with Asterath Red, which I believe is out of production now, but really any bright red will work. This was a dry paint, and I just think Games Workshop stopped selling those. But it works quite well, just hitting all over the model. It'll pick out all the fine details quite well. It'll take a couple passes just to get it nice and built up, but it will look quite nice in my opinion. If you don't know how to dry brush, just get some paint on a slightly messed up brush, wipe off most of it on some paper towel, and then just lightly drag over the details you want to get picked up. And as you go over and over, the details will effectively highlight themselves. It works quite well on models like this and Eldar models in general. But you do want to have a heavy hand to be sure. I'm not pressing too hard, but you just want to get this everywhere because it really does make the model a lot nicer to read from a distance. Now, with all of that nice and highlighted and an earthquake apparently hitting mid-recording, I brought out the blue I'm going to use for the cloth. This is just, I believe, like intermediate blue from Vallejo, but any sort of medium blue will work. And you're going to want to paint this over the cloth. Now, this cloth is actually one of my favorite parts of this model. It's just very well thought out, right? Obviously, it makes the dangly crotch flag, as one would expect. But it also has the two bits that wrap around the legs, and then it wraps up around the back, around the waist, and up over the chest. It's just a kind of a cool pattern to paint. It's not something that you see quite so often. So I quite enjoyed that as one of my favorite aspects of this model. Now, with all of that blue down, we're honestly almost done. I did apply a bit of wraith bone or, a Rakarth flesh, something along those lines. Any fleshy tone will work. Lighter, Caucasian flesh tone will work. Onto the orbs on her jetpack, as those are going to be orange, which is just a color I use a lot for my soul stones. Not soul stones. What are they called? Are they? No, soul stone. That's the thing from Marvel. Whatever. You know the things that the Eldar used to protect their souls from Slaanesh. Now, if you're wondering what color scheme I'm doing here, this one is actually not a Spoons Rattling original. This was one from a website called Colors of the Craft World, which went defunct in 2006 for a ring hay. Here you can see I switched to a black background because I'm a bit of an adventurous idiot, and I did not realize that it would make the colors... I'm not sure how to describe it, but I think I generally prefer the blue background. Here you can see me applying that orange through a magma droth flame over the orbs, just to get them nice and standing out against the rest of the model. And from here we are truly almost done. Pretty much the last step we have to do is the metallics. Now, metallics aren't super common on Eldar, but mine do have it. It's going to be the shoulder pads, the elbow pads, the knee pads, and the faceplate, as well as the venti bits on her jump pack are going to be painted up in lead belcher, just the classic dark metal. And then we are going to highlight with Stormhost silver, as that's a very nice color for highlighting dark metal. I also painted the metallic bits of her bolt pistol with this. You may have noticed on my hand I had a burn, but I recovered from that, no need to worry. If anyone even noticed that, maybe I'm just insane. But this is all pretty simple. You've painted metallics before, and I did also paint in her joints, which I usually don't do, but with this more power armor design for this color scheme, I think it did fit quite well and also helped break up the model a little bit. After washing all of the metallics, I simply went in with Stormhost Silver and did some pretty messy highlights, admittedly. Not my finest work, but as you can see, I did attempt to fix some of that, but it's just something you'll have to go back in with lead belcher to touch up and just try to control better and use the side of your brush where you can. But I wanted to include that little mess up. I also highlighted things like the bolter magazines, as well as, of course, her knee pads and her knee pads. And the Ankh, actually, shout out Exodia. Here we have this sister's model that is just kind of a t-shirt and shorts, one with a volleyball. Just kind of plain, honestly. Now, I did dry brush this model with white, as I primed gray. We're going to be using a lot of contrast here, because I was going to go for something kind of like Zero Suit Samus in terms of color scheme, because I've been playing a lot of Metroid, so it's on the mind, so to say. And I like Samus. She's a really cool character. If I were to do a Sister's Army, I probably would theme it all around Samus Aran, so I figured this would be a fun way to do a little homage to that, because I'm not going to collect Sisters, at least not anytime soon. Now, once you've dry brushed everything all over, we're going to move on to our first layer of contrast paint, and in that Zero Suit sort of style, we're going to go with Azerman Blue, same blue we used earlier, and just put that all over her shorts and shirt. Though avoid the fleur-de-lis, we're going to paint that purple, like the symbol that Samus has on her back when she's in her Zero Suit. I was going to talk about this model a little further, but before I do that, make sure to also get most of her shoes blue, but leave the soles just gray, as we're going to paint those yellow to go with the jet heels that she usually wears. This model to me is just kind of interesting because it's not really like an overtly, like crazily lewd model. It's just kind of like what a sister would look like in a swimsuit, because obviously they wouldn't be wearing anything insane. T-shirt, shorts, pair of reasonable shoes. It's just kind of an oddball. That's why it is the weird in this video, because I mean, there's not really a unit you would proxy this for. This is more of a diorama mini, if anything else. But it's just kind of funny, It's just a model that doesn't really have a home, but it's still a good model. I have no problem with it. I think it's honestly kind of cool. It's just like, yeah, if sisters were going to go swimming, this is what they would wear. Now, for the next step, it's going to be a pretty big one. We're going to paint all of the skin and the hair in Wraithbone. This is just kind of to unify it all, as we're going to use a couple different contrasts here. If you wanted, you could use a more warm flesh tone if you wanted, but this is just what I went with, and I think it worked out just fine. Again, over gray, this will take a couple coats, especially over the legs, since that's just one big, smooth section, effectively. It can be a little bit iffy to get that nice and even. It'll take probably 3 coats on the legs. But once you get all of that done, we're going to move on to the next step of contrasts. Now, using a purple speed paint, I colored in the fleur-de-lis on her chest. This was not the best color for it, but it's just what I had on hand. As this is a little too dark, maybe I should have used a pink, but I didn't want to go too crazy, so I just used this dark purple to hit the fleur-de-lis, because again, Samus has a purple design on her back, or pink, whatever you want to call it. This is an important part just to get that detail and also to complete the color scheme, so to say. Now, next I used Crusader skin over all the flesh, but not the hair. On the arms and the face, this worked fine. On the legs, I don't know if I just didn't shake this up enough, but it really didn't come out. So we're going to layer over all of that later. But again, on the arms and the face, it looked fine, though it will need some touching up on the face to make it not look so haggard. It definitely looks kind of old lady-ish, even mannish, which is not the look I am going for, of course. And then for the hair, of course, Samus is blonde, so I just went with more of the same yellow we used earlier. This is probably a little too blonde, all things considered, but it gets the look across, and I didn't have another yellow that I really was dying to use. I could have base coated with a warmer flesh tone, which would have touched this up, but not the end of the world. Also, I'm an idiot. Can you see how bad the focus was there? I'm going to kill my past self. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to layer over most of that skin just to bring it up to a nicer consistency, but we are going to leave that original color in the recesses. For the face, I pretty much just highlighted the entire thing, leaving very little in the way of darkened areas. It's definitely not my best face work. I think the eyes just looked a little too dark, but that's what happens. I also painted the volleyball with a little bit of green. I should have done a brighter green. I was going for it sort of looking like a Metroid, which it evidently does not. But once you're done with this, you have effectively finished the model. Very quick and easy, as you'd expect. It's not like this model has a lot of stuff going on. Very quick and easy, and I admittedly just painted this one much more recently than the other two. Let's get on to that 360, and I'll give my final thoughts. Here we can see the trifecta of sisters here. Now, obviously, my favorite model here is the Chaos Sister front and center here. Not only is she just pretty giant, and I prefer bigger models to more mortal-sized models. I think the detail there, the armor there is really good. I'm really happy with how the paint scheme came out. Honestly, I think I might collect a little bit more of those just to intersperse with my army. I'll come up with whatever fluff needed to explain it away. But overall, this episode was not quite as fun as the Necrons one, but still was a very fun episode to make. Let me know what you thought down below, and then, of course, put in your wants, who you want to see next, and who you guess is going to be next as well. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.